up of nations, Gog and Magog to the fray. Hark, what soundeth is creation.
And this is on page 35, and this takes you into the page 38, where the famous Sunday portion is. You see, remember, they're talking about recommendations to save the family. And earlier, I don't know if I could find it back now, but earlier I had read for you a part where they spoke about religious attendance as being one of the things that was a problem. The decrease in religious attendance, in other words, going to church on Sunday. Can't find it back right now, but they had said it earlier, but just in brief. So now they're going to expand on it, because that is what will take you into why they want back the blue laws to make people to go back to church. Let me read what Sister Creamer says here. Brother Tommy says, we can't look to the South King and neither the North King. All want the same thing, and that is to rule the whole world, yes. And all are in transgression against God's law and against our rights and freedoms. Then Sister Creamer said here, Sister Anissa, there will be a push back against some of these policies. Therefore, there is need for miracles. The left in America will not take this. Of course. And this is what we have said. They will not get through just by arguing, lying on some SCOTUS case, Supreme Court ruling, McGowan versus Maryland, and so on. They will not get through with that. The miracles would be needed to help them and to help all who want this. All the apostate Protestants. Sister Amy said it is coming subtle. They are looking at the moralities of the king of the south and are proposing their solution for the sinful state of affairs by righteousness by works. As we show that they are worse than the king of the south, that they are healing the hurt slightly, which is no healing at all, no true justification, what would they do? Charge on us that we are responsible for displeasing God. That's right. That's right. And with this document, there will be more and more agitation. The agitation will grow wider, as Sister White says, wider agitation. This is the beginnings. And you're hearing the kind of reasonings, you're hearing the kind of arguments, okay? And the thing is that there's sort of like a popular position for this, because people are generally fed up with the garbage of the king of the south. They're fed up with the cultural Marxism. They're disgusted. It has hurt them. And they want back, as they would say, they want to take back the country for God, take back the families for God and the children and all of that. So there is a popular sentiment for this that the Heritage Foundation is proposing here. Although, yes, they will get opposition. So when we get to page 35, this is what we're dealing with. On page 35, after they speak about, they flesh out more about the family, and they talk about dads matter to children. You know, they push their pro-patriarchy and so on. They talk about marriage versus cohabitation. I'm not reading out all those things to you, but I'm showing you what leads up to this issue of going back to church on Sunday. And then under this section about dads matter to children, they end by saying that means that the best way to ensure that more children grow up in loving homes with both parents and active involved fathers is to promote marriage as the cornerstone of family life. The benefits of marriage are simply too large to ignore. Now look at this. They put this chart here on page 35. What is it called? Religious services, frequency of attendance. And this chart, they're going to speak about it below. It covers their statistics, which show that if you judge from 1975 to 2020, showing you the share of attendance frequency in percentage going up on the left here, and showing you using the different color-coded lines, how often people have been going to church, whether it be never or rarely, once to a few times per year, weekly or more, 1 to 3 times per month. They show you that between 1975 and 2020, if we go down to the most recent time, which is 2020, there is a sharp increase, the greatest increase, the red hair, way above, say, above maybe 45%. They're showing that there's a greater increase of people never going to church or rarely going to church. In 2020, as opposed to years prior when they were going. So as the years rolled on, 1975, 1980, 85, 90, 90, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, 2020, there was a greater increase in people never going to church or rarely going to church. And a decline in people actually going. Like if you look at the green line, by 2020, the green represents 1 to 3 times per month. People who go to church 1 to 3 times per month. And that line dips below 10%. So less than 10% of Americans are going to church 1 to 3 times per month. In terms of those going weekly or more, that figure has moved from above 35% in 1975 to maybe about 22 or 25 or maybe 23% in 2020. So there's a decline in going to church weekly or more from 1975 to 2020. And as for those who only go once to a few times per year, that figure, it's all over the place. It starts here in the 20s, really, and it dipped over the years and dipped and dipped and dipped and some fluctuations. And right now it's still considered low. Suffice it to say that the highest percentage is the one where they never go or rarely go. Now, what are they attributing to people never or rarely going to church being the most on that chart? That's the question. So look, cultural and behavioral obstacles to family formation. So this is the context of looking at church attendance. They want to establish it is in the context of cultural and behavioral obstacles to family formation. So what's causing our families to decline? What's encouraging or what is contributing to the decline or what's contributing to less and less families being formed? What are the cultural and behavioral obstacles? I read, this section explores many of today's obstacles to family formation, from decline in church attendance to hookup culture to drug use. Now, I remember saying to you earlier, the portion had read religious attendance, but you see now what it says? Church attendance. That's what they're dealing with specifically. So in their proposals, there's a study of the issue of church attendance and how it affects the family. Now, remember on Wednesday night, if you caught what I was saying, I showed you that in the past, Sunday laws were religious Sunday closing laws. And they had with them the feature of you being commanded back to church, coming out of England, coming down through the early colonies. But as time went by, and in particular with the arrival of the First Amendment, that prohibits the establishment of religion by law and prohibits the free exercise of religion by law, or prohibits, the prohibition of the free exercise of religion by law. With the arrival of the First Amendment, those religious Sunday closing laws became more secular. And one of the aspects of them becoming secular was the removal of the requirement to go to church on Sunday. Do you remember I showed you that on last Wednesday night? I showed you other things too, the fact that they made a lot of exemptions for businesses that could open and things you could sell and so on and so forth. But the main thing was to see that one of the things you could for sure see in all the Sunday laws that remain in America on different states is that they no longer have the feature of forcing you back to church on Sunday. But here we have the Heritage Foundation appealing to Congress for federal legislation to tell people to have a uniform day of rest, but not just a uniform day of rest, talking about going back to church. They took the time to study and bring statistics and bring a chart to show we have a serious problem with the decline of church attendance. And they're going to link it to the blue laws being repealed over time. So you see for sure what they want. They actually want to regulate you going back to church on Sunday. They want the revival of religious, persecutive, federal, militant Sunday laws in America. That is their desire. It is evident. Watch. The decline in church attendance. Church attendance in the United States has collapsed over the past 50 years with profound consequences for individuals, families, and society. In 1975, over a third of American adults attended services weekly. Today, that figure has fallen to just over 1 in 5. Wow, less than 10%. Just over 1 in 5 go to church weekly now. Almost half of US adults now rarely or never attend, a doubling since the mid 1970s. The decline is evident across every major demographic, men and women. Just one moment, please. Let me just have it in my hands so that when I have problems seeing on the screen, I'd be able to read it properly still, right? Okay, that's page 35. So if anybody wanted to know, 32, right? 33. Okay. 34 and 35. Just give me one moment. Okay. Having a little problem locating my page. Okay. All right. I think I found it now. 36. Right. Right. So what you are seeing, okay, there it is. 35. Okay. The decline is evident across every major demographic. Men and women, young and old, married and unmarried, Black, white, and Hispanic, and especially among those with less, right, with less formal education. There is no single explanation for the decline in religiosity in the United States. However, the growing alignment of liberal political identity with secularism, I scroll down, right, with secularism, oops, right, with secularism, so I read that again. There is no single explanation for the decline in religiosity in the United States. However, the growing alignment of liberal political identity with secularism during the 1990s and 2000s led to a sorting of organized religion. Liberal-leaning persons disaffiliated in much larger numbers than did self-described conservatives. The differences are now remarkably stark. Additionally, greater preoccupation with and demand for consumer goods and experiences have raised the perceived opportunity cost of weekly worship on a weekend as retail and entertainment options have exploded. So here they're saying, we have all this consumer culture, people just buying, shopping and thing on a weekend and so on, and seeking entertainment. And this has raised the opportunity for those things. And so people, it's at the cost, they say, of weekly worship. So people are not going to church anymore. They want to go out and hang out, buy stuff, shop on the weekend and entertainment, etc. Then they say, watch the connection now, watch this. Blue law repeals. You see, this is before we get to Sunday, We're talking about the problem of not church attendance decrease and how it's affecting the family. Blue law repeals have produced quasi-experimental evidence that when secular substitutes become more accessible, attendance and church giving drop, suggesting that a restoration of blue laws could have a restorative effect. Are you hearing that? So if the evidence proves, this is the argument, that because we had repealed blue laws, people have less access in attendance to church. This is a stupid lie. I mean, anybody could go to church if they want, blue law or not. But it's forced, they want to force people. And that's what blue laws did in the original sense. So they're saying, oh, well, when we repealed blue laws and we give them secular substitutes like going shopping and entertainment on the weekend, that caused attendance and church going to drop. And so they say, well, by implication, if we restore the blue laws, we could restore people going back to church. And then we will restore the family, because they will explain to you how they think the family is connected with going to church. Are you seeing what I'm showing you here, brethren? Are you seeing what I'm showing you here? Watch. Continuing. Pressure to spend more time at work, either from careerism on one end or inflation on the other, has reallocated evenings and weekends away from neighborhood organizations. These trends have weakened the local social capital that historically supported congregational life. As for family formation, one second, congregational life, and then the next paragraph, one second. How? The question, how? How has the decline in religiosity affected marriage and child raising? So they're going to tie it for you now. So we repealed blue laws. We encouraged the decline in church attendance. How does the decline in church attendance affect marriage and child raising? Research from Harvard University's Human Flourishing Program, more than 66,000 participants in a 14-year study, showed that regular religious service attendance is associated with 50% lower divorce rates in later life. And this finding is consistent with other studies. You hear that? So, more people going to church, less divorce. The family is strengthened. Remove blue laws, less people going to church, more divorce. The family is weakened. You see the rationale they're presenting? You see the apparent rational and good they're presenting? The apparent good? This is how they're reasoning. I continue. The paragraph beginning, research shows. All right? Continuing here. Research consistently demonstrates that the religiosity of parents is associated with a range of benefits for children's psychological and social development. So if parents go into church, they are better able to help the children psychologically and socially in their development. A nationally representative study by John Bath Kwaski, Xiao Jie and Martin Levin found that parental religiosity was significantly associated with enhanced psychological adjustment, greater self-control, better social competence, and lower levels of internalizing and externalizing behavior problems among kindergarten-age children, as rated by both parents and teachers. And here now, see all the little numbers in between? It's because they cite in study, yeah? These people have sat down and they have worked out how they're going to bring their arguments. And they've done research to prepare and put together this paper and to say to Congress, hey, we have the evidence, we did the studies. We know there's a direct correlation between repealing the blue laws and therefore declining church attendance and the way how our children are psychologically and socially affected. And we have more divorces and less families and mothers and fathers are affected. See what is going on here, brethren? They say these findings have been confirmed across multiple cultural contexts and age groups. The effect seems to run both ways. Adults who report stronger childhood relationships with both mother and father are likelier to attend regular religious services and exhibit higher perceived social trust later in life. Did you hear that? They say that when adults who attend regular religious services, they are likely to have a higher and exhibit stronger relationships with their children. and as a result, higher perceived social trust later in life. You see, the Bible tells us in Revelation 13, he calls it all, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, children, mother and father, adults and children will all be compelled by the Sunday law. And here they are making the case that parents and children need the Sunday law, need to go back to church to help themselves. Continuing, as for family formation, look how church attendance helps family formation now. As for family formation, regular church attendance increases the odds of marriage for men and women of all ages, races, and ethnicities by at least 2/3. So if we send them back to church, you're going to have more marriage. Married church-going Americans across denominational and racial classifications are more likely to describe themselves as, quote, very happy than are their non-religious counterparts, including a higher sense of well-being in times of financial difficulty. There is also a strong positive link between religious participation and birth rates, with religiously engaged people and couples having significantly higher total fertility rates than secular population. So if they're more religious, if they're more going to church, they're more likely to have more children. They're more likely to marry and stay married. This is the argument, brethren, that they are making. See, I'm only showing you because I'm saying when they go come with the arguments. And if you're familiar with the arguments and how to answer with the faith, at least you have an idea. I'm going to skip down a little bit and go to the paragraph. The data are strong. The last paragraph under this section. Right here. The data are strong that religious people are more likely to get married, marry earlier, divorce less, have more children, and beneficially influence their children's social development. Because religion has an outside impact on marriage and family, it merits outsized social and cultural support. One of the biggest impediments that religious Americans must confront, however, is widespread cultural and government-enforced secularism. So they make it plain. One of our proposals to save the family in America is we have to get people back to church. And blue laws did that in the past, but we repealed them. And it was connected to, or it caused a decline in church attendance. And with the decline in church attendance, the parents are less religious. And by being less religious and more secular, they're not marrying again like before, the amount of marriages. They are more likely to divorce. They don't have a good impact upon their children psychologically and socially. And the children themselves don't have a strong trust relationship with the family. They're tying it all to Sunday. When the Bible shows it is a Sabbath that is a blessing. I will show you before we end. Sister White shows the problem of all this problem in the family, the problem in marriage, the problem with children and crime. And so it's because they put away the law of God and the Sabbath. And yet they come and talking about they need Sunday to bring back morality. Sister White actually identified the problem with marriage, adultery, and family. The problems therein as being because they put away the law of God. And we know the Bible shows this. Because if you could sin against God's law, is against each other you wouldn't sin? And have breakdown of relationships and less inclined to marry because you want to be promiscuous?
Bear the helmet of salvation and the mighty gospel shield. Let the breastplate peace be on me. Take the Spirit's sword in hand.